My name is Amelia and I just turned 29. From the outside, my family might look like the picture of an ideal American family in a quiet Seattle suburb. But only I know that beneath the seemingly perfect surface, cracks had been growing for years. My older brother Ethan, 4 years older than me, has always been my parents' greatest pride. Gregory and Linda never missed a chance to call him a genius, the family's golden child. Me. I was just the okay daughter, never able to catch that proud sparkle in their eyes no matter how hard I tried. We grew up in a 2-story house with a backyard oak tree where my dad built Ethan a treehouse. I still remember those summer afternoons, Dad lifting Ethan up the wooden ladder, laughing as he held up his math medals. I stood at the base of the tree, clutching my sketchbook, whispering, "Dad, I just finished this drawing." But he only glanced at it before turning back to Ethan. Mom would smooth my hair and say, "Amelia, you should study math more like your brother. Drawing is fun, but it won't give you a future." Back then, I thought those words were just ordinary comparisons. But as I grew, I realized my parents only measured worth in achievements and money. Ethan excelled, winning prize after prize. He was accepted into a prestigious Ivy League school on the East Coast, and the entire extended family was flown in to celebrate. I still remember Dad's toast, eyes shining with pride. "This is my son, the future of our family. Ethan will change the world with his brilliance." Everyone clapped while I sat in the corner, forcing a smile as my chest tightened. 2 years later, when I was accepted into a public university in Oregon to study education, the whole family simply took me to a modest Italian restaurant. Mom set down her menu with a flat tone. "Teaching is fine. Stable, no need to worry about unemployment. No flowers, no relatives, no booming congratulations." I pretended to smile, but it stung bitterly inside. When Ethan graduated with top honors in computer science, he was immediately hired by a startup. With both skill and luck, the company skyrocketed and was acquired by a tech giant. By 33, Ethan was a millionaire, living in a luxury condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Meanwhile, I became an elementary school teacher after graduation. I loved my job. The sparkle in children's eyes when they understood multiplication, the messy little drawings they gave me. But love didn't pay the bills. I carried more than $60,000 in student debt, struggling each month to cover nearly $500 in loan payments. I rented a small apartment with a friend and drove an old Honda that had been repainted 3 times. Sometimes Ethan offered to help. "Amelia, let me pay off your student loans." For me, that amount is nothing. I only shook my head. "No, I need to stand on my own. I won't turn into anyone's burden or charity case, not even yours." He sighed while my parents seized the chance to compare again. "Ethan always thinks about family. But you're stubborn, always making things harder for yourself." I bit my lip, swallowing tears. To them, I was just the misguided child, not worth expecting much from. But I never imagined that one day when I stopped by my parents' house unannounced, I would overhear words that shattered my entire world. I grew up always chasing the enormous shadow of my brother. From elementary school, Ethan was the star in our parents' eyes, straight to report cards, while I, no matter how hard I tried, only managed good enough. I remember in 4th grade when my landscape painting was chosen for the school's spring art show. I rushed to tell Mom, glowing with pride. "Mom, my painting got picked. The teacher said my colors are so lively." She gave a faint smile, then asked immediately, "But what about math, Amelia? How did you score on yesterday's test?" Her question dimmed my joy in an instant. Meanwhile, if Ethan won even a small spelling bee, Dad would run around the neighborhood bragging to everyone. Our house gradually turned into a shrine to my brother's achievements. The living room walls were covered with Ethan's certificates, medals, and gold trophies. And my artwork? It was stuck temporarily on the fridge, only to be covered a few days later by an electric bill or a grocery coupon. When I entered high school, the favoritism became even clearer. Ethan joined the science team and won first place in the state with a solar energy project. My parents rented out an upscale restaurant to celebrate, even flying in relatives from California. At the same time, I had just won a silver medal in a creative writing contest, but all I got was a dismissive comment from my father. "Literature is interesting, but you should spend time on more practical subjects." That sentence felt like an invisible knife. Many times I asked myself, Did they ever truly see me beyond grades or achievements? I knew I wasn't like my brother, but I had my own worth. I could connect with people, listen to friends' secrets, and use my writing and art to comfort them. But to my parents, all of that was just a pastime. By senior year, the gap between Ethan and me wasn't just a crack anymore. It had turned into a canyon. Ethan received his acceptance letter from Yale University, along with a partial scholarship. The whole house erupted with joy. I can still remember that evening. Dad raised a glass of red wine, his eyes glistening with tears. My son will join the nation's elite. Ethan, you will bring honor to the Gregory family. The room filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the kitchen corner, holding my own acceptance letter from a public university in Oregon to study education. I took a deep breath, stepped into the living room, and raised the letter. I also just got accepted. I'll be studying to become an elementary school teacher. The room went silent for a few seconds. Then Mom nodded slightly, speaking as if to console me. Well, teaching is fine. At least you'll have a stable job. And just like that, the laughter and attention swung right back to Ethan. The letter in my hand suddenly felt like a meaningless piece of paper. I tried not to cry that night, but deep down I knew. My place in the family had been set. I wasn't the pride, I was just the shadow in the background. Through 4 years of college, nothing changed. I worked part-time as a tutor for younger students, both to pay for school and to practice my teaching skills. I loved those evenings sitting with children and watching their eyes light up when they solved a tough math problem. But every time I came home, Mom always asked, "Have you thought about graduate school? Or switching to a higher-paying field?" Meanwhile, Ethan constantly sent home pictures from state-of-the-art labs, along with glowing praise from his professors. Those photos were instantly printed, framed, and hung neatly in the living room. That gap only grew wider. And I, though trying to hide it, began to nurture a terrifying suspicion. Maybe my parents had never truly been proud of me. I thought I could accept it as long as there was still some family bond. But I didn't realize that this simmering favoritism would one day ignite and explode. After graduation, I began teaching at a public elementary school in the suburbs of Seattle. On the first day, walking into class with a name tag that read, Ms. Amelia, I felt like I had finally found my own path. The innocent smiles, the curious eyes of the children made me believe my work mattered. But meaning doesn't pay the bills. With a starting salary of less than $40,000 a year, I struggled to cover rent for a small apartment, food expenses, and my student loan debt of more than $60,000. Every month, nearly $500 went straight to the bank, swallowing up a quarter of my income. I got used to dinners of instant noodles, to recycling the same clothes bought from discount stores. My roommate Natalie often joked, "Amelia, you're the model teacher. Even your wallet is as disciplined as your students." I forced a smile, though inside I often felt the sting of humiliation. Meanwhile, Ethan's life went in a completely different direction. After graduation, he joined a startup developing payment software. At first, I thought it was just a small project, but within a few years, the company exploded. Investment poured in, and Ethan's name began appearing in business magazines. By the time he was 33, the company had been sold to a major corporation, and Ethan became a millionaire overnight. I remember the first time I visited his new apartment downtown. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, all of Seattle sparkled with lights. The living room was so spacious I could imagine my students playing tag in it. The kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances, the imported Italian sofa looked flawless, and in the basement garage sat a brand-new Tesla Model S. "What do you think? Is this place too big for just one person?" Ethan asked, pouring wine with a grin. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "It's beautiful. Feels like another world." But inside, I felt as if I were standing between two planets, Ethan's luxurious one and my cramped, bill-filled reality. What hurt me more was how my parents reacted to the contrast. My father, Gregory, retired 2 years earlier than planned because Ethan wanted his parents to enjoy life after years of sacrifice. They began traveling constantly, a cruise to Alaska, then all the way to the Mediterranean. My mother, Linda, finally got her dream kitchen after 20 years of waiting. Ethan paid to renovate the whole house. Marble countertops, custom oak cabinets, even a professional double oven. One evening, as I quietly helped clear the table, she beamed with pride. "My son is truly devoted." He's grateful for his parents and even bought me a Lexus. See that, Amelia? That's success. I froze. The word success stung like a brand, reminding me that in their eyes, I had never measured up. Sometimes Ethan offered to help me. Once, when my old Honda broke down on my way to work, he said, "Amelia, let me buy you a new car. You can't keep driving that wreck forever." I shook my head. "No, I'll handle it. I don't want to live off anyone's pity, not even yours." Ethan sighed, his eyes heavy with disappointment. I knew he genuinely wanted to help, but inside me a fragile pride wouldn't allow it. And so the years passed, the distance between us growing larger. Family gatherings became stages to praise Ethan. Dad always started with, "My son just met with an investor from Silicon Valley. They're discussing a multi-million-dollar project." He would go on and on, while if I tried to share about a student's progress, their eyes drifted away. Eventually, I learned to stay silent, listening instead of interrupting. Driving home afterward, I often blasted the radio to drown out the thought in my head. Why does my work mean so little to them? I tried to accept it, telling myself that financial differences were just part of life. But I couldn't have guessed that the gap would not shrink. It would turn into a fracture, deepening within our family. And then one day, with just a few words from my parents, I realized it was never only about money, it was betrayal. The news of my brother Ethan's engagement arrived like a whirlwind. That day, the whole family was invited to his luxurious apartment. The moment we stepped in, the chandelier light caught the diamond ring on Sophia's hand, sparkling like lightning. She smiled, holding out her hand for everyone to admire. "We're planning to get married next year. We want a wedding to remember." My mother nearly squealed. "Oh, this is what I've been dreaming of. Sophia, you are the perfect bride this family has always wished for." Her words tightened my throat. I had once told her that Ryan, my boyfriend, and I were thinking about the future too, but she brushed it off as if it didn't matter. A few weeks later, we met to discuss the wedding details. Sophia had rented a private room in an upscale Italian restaurant. The menu had no prices, just that made my skin crawl. My parents arrived in the shiny new Lexus Ethan had gifted them, while Sophia's family entered with elegance and old money confidence. Sophia opened a leather folder, speaking clearly like a CEO. "We've chosen Capri, Italy. A resort on the cliffside overlooking the Mediterranean. It can hold about 200 guests. The entire resort will be booked for 3 nights." I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. Booking an entire resort for 3 nights? I caught a glimpse of a figure, over $200,000, on the budget sheet as the event manager scrolled through the iPad. Sophia continued, her voice full of excitement. "For the bridesmaids' dresses, I ordered from a couture brand. Each one is about $3,000. Of course, Ethan and I will cover half. Each of you only needs to pay $1,500. I felt sweat bead on my forehead. $1,500, equal to 3 months of my utility bills. Not to mention hair, makeup, shoes. Everything would pile into an enormous number. And it didn't stop there. One of the other bridesmaids announced gleefully, "We're having the bachelorette party in Barcelona. A villa for 4 days, 3 nights. You have to come, Amelia, it'll be amazing." I forced a smile, but my heart was racing. In my mind, the costs piled up. Flights to Europe, villa fees, resort in Capri, dresses, gifts. The rough total was nearly $8,000. That was my entire emergency savings plus credit card debt. After dinner, I pulled Ethan aside, trying to keep my voice calm. "I can't afford this. Just the dress alone is almost 2 months of my loan payments." He looked at me, guilt flashing across his face. "I'm sorry, Amelia. I didn't think about that. I'll cover everything for you. Money isn't a problem for me now." I shook my head, my throat tight. "No. I don't want to be a burden or a charity case among Sophia's wealthy friends. I just need you both to understand that not everyone is in the same situation." Ethan nodded, his eyes full of regret. "I'll talk to Sophia, we'll find a better solution." But when he brought it up at the table, Sophia instantly brushed it aside, her smile stiff. "We've already signed the contract with the dress brand. This is our big day, it can't be changed. These expenses are worth it." My parents sat silently, not stepping in to defend me. They just smiled and nodded as if everything was normal. I waited for someone to say, "We'll help you with part of it," but no such words came. That night, I collapsed into a chair in my apartment. Natalie made me a cup of hot tea, listening as I listed each cost like reading a sentence. If I go through with this, I'll lose at least $8,000. My entire savings will vanish. My car's air conditioner is broken. I haven't seen a dentist yet, but now everything will be pushed aside for this extravagant wedding. Natalie squeezed my shoulder, sighing. Amelia, you need to talk to them directly. If your family lets you fall into this situation, something's wrong. I stared into the tea, tears falling. I loved my brother, but the truth was undeniable. To my parents and even Sophia, I was just a supporting character, expected to keep up the perfect picture. I didn't know how I'd manage. But deep inside, I felt it clearly. The real storm hadn't even begun. One Sunday afternoon in early May, I drove to my parents' house to hand-deliver RSVP cards for Ethan and Sophia's wedding. Mom had texted urging, Amelia, remember to send them soon, the planner needs the final list. I had planned to mail them but decided in person would be quicker. The house I grew up in looked the same on the outside. Mom's tulips in bloom, the white fence gleaming. From the outside, no one would guess that behind those walls lay a growing cold distance. I rang the doorbell. No answer. The front door was locked, but I had a spare key. Maybe they're in the backyard, I thought. I placed my bag on the hallway table and called out, Mom? Dad? I came to drop off the cards. No reply. Then I heard faint voices coming from Dad's study at the end of the hall, the room he always called his serious space, lined with leather-bound books and golf trophies. I stepped quietly closer, about to knock, but froze when I heard my own name spoken. My father's voice, Gregory's, was low but clear. Amelia is complaining about the wedding costs again. Then don't worry about it. Let her handle it herself. This is her chance to learn responsibility. I held my breath, my heart pounding. Ethan spoke, his tone filled with concern. But I know she's struggling. A teacher's salary can't possibly cover this. If it continues, Amelia will be drained. My mother's voice cut in, cold as a knife. That's exactly why she needs this experience. She's used to living frugally, so pushing a little more won't hurt. It's good for her character. My hands began to tremble, numb with shock. My father continued firmly, Ethan, don't let pity ruin things. This wedding is your and Sophia's day, it has to be perfect. We've set aside $50,000 for our family's share. The Petersons, Sophia's parents, are contributing a lot too, we can't fall behind. I gasped silently. $50,000? While I was working myself to exhaustion to pay just a few $100s a month in loans. Ethan fell quiet for a moment, then spoke, his voice tight. But what about Amelia's college fund? I remember you once said you saved for both of us. She asked many times, and Dad, you told her it was all lost in the market crash. A tense silence. Then my mother sighed. Tell the truth then. We actually redirected that money to Ethan, for grad school and to invest in his first startup. It was the smart choice. Look at him now, so successful. If we had given it to Amelia, it would have brought nothing back except her becoming a teacher with a pitiful salary. My father added in a heavier voice, she doesn't need to know. She believes we did everything we could and that's enough. Bringing it up again would only cause trouble. I stood frozen outside the door, tears streaming hot down my face. For years I carried guilt, believing I wasn't as capable as my brother, that maybe the money was truly gone. But now I knew, it had all been a carefully crafted lie. To them, I was never a worthy investment. Inside, Ethan tried to protest. I don't feel right about this. Amelia deserves to know the truth. My mother immediately cut him off. No, Ethan. Telling her would only create division. She's already sensitive, this would just fuel resentment. Let her think it was fate. That was all I could take. I backed away, stifling sobs, then turned and fled to the front door. The quiet click as it shut behind me was my only luck. They hadn't noticed. By the time I reached my car, my whole body was shaking. I collapsed against the steering wheel, sobs tearing out of me. My entire childhood spent trying to prove myself, my adulthood spent buried in debt. All because, in their eyes, I was a poor investment. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Amelia, did you send the RSVP yet? Don't miss the deadline. I stared at the screen, blurred with tears. How could she write so casually, as if nothing had just been said in that room? I drove away, stopping several times along the road because my eyes burned too much to see. In my head, my mother's words echoed, "It's good for her character." That night, I collapsed on my apartment couch. Natalie was alarmed to see me hollow-eyed like a shell of myself. I choked out the entire story. She held me tightly, repeating, "Amelia, that's cruel. Parents don't get to treat you like that." But I didn't even know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream in their faces. Another part felt only the crushing weight of betrayal. I sat in silence until the room was swallowed in darkness. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Images flashed. Ethan's medals hanging on the walls, my father's glowing eyes, my mother's radiant smile every time they spoke of him. It all played in reverse like an old film reel. The truth hit me hard. I had never stood a chance at fairness. And in that moment, I knew one thing. I couldn't stay silent forever. For a full week after overhearing the conversation in my father's study, I practically disappeared. I called in sick for 2 days, avoided coworkers, skipped Sunday dinner. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from Mom, Dad, and even Ethan, but I only read them, never replied. Natalie and Ryan, my boyfriend, took turns bringing me food, trying to create a safe circle around me. They urged me to confront my parents, but I didn't have the courage yet. Every time I remembered the words, "It's good for her character," my heart ripped apart again. On the 8th day, I sat by the window watching the rain, a whisper in my head. "If you don't speak up, you'll drown in this resentment." My hands shook as I typed a message to all 3 of them. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Willow Creek Restaurant. We need to talk." My treat. They arrived right on time, all 3 sharing a ride from my parents' house. I had been waiting in a secluded corner, half a glass of wine already gone. When the server led them to the table, the tension was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. "Amelia, you scared us half to death." "A whole week gone without a word of explanation," Mom started, her voice tinged with reproach. I pulled my hand back when she reached for me. My voice was low but firm. "I'm not sick. I heard everything. Last Sunday I was at the house outside Dad's study. I heard every word you said." The color drained from Mom's face. Dad froze, his spoon suspended midair. Ethan shut his eyes, pain written across his features. "Amelia, it's not what you think," Dad spoke first, his tone heavy. "You need to understand the context. The family finances had to be managed for efficiency. Tuition, investments, those were strategic decisions." I laughed bitterly. Strategic? So I was the losing investment and Ethan was the profitable stock? "You put your children's love on a profit and loss sheet." Mom frowned, trying to soften her tone. "You're being too sensitive. We love both of you equally. But we can't deny Ethan's potential was clearer. We just wanted to secure the family's future." I stared into her eyes, enunciating each word. The family's future, or just his future? Silence. Only the faint clinking of silverware from a nearby table. "Do you even know how I've lived?" I pressed on. Cutting every food dollar, postponing dentist visits, refusing car repairs, just to pay off loans. While you secretly funneled my money to him, then lied that the market crashed. Dad slammed his glass down, his voice rising. "You should be grateful because that's how Ethan became successful. And when he succeeds, the whole family benefits. That's long-term thinking." I gave a sharp, bitter laugh. "But I was never asked. I'm not merchandise for you to bargain my future away." Ethan sat silent, then suddenly spoke, his voice firm. "I remember the promise you made to Amelia too. I always thought it was fair for both of us. Hearing the truth now, it doesn't sit right." Mom shot him a warning glare as if ordering him to stay quiet. In that instant I realized, even the golden child was trapped in their decisions. I inhaled deeply, feeling the strings in my chest about to snap. "I won't be at this wedding. I can't stand there smiling, knowing the truth you've hidden. I need distance to decide if this family is even worth saving." Mom gasped, almost whispering, "Amelia, what are you saying? Without you, what will the wedding look like? What will people think of our family?" I rose to my feet, dropping my napkin onto the table, my voice trembling but resolute. "You care more about appearances than the pain I'm in? Then I'm sorry, but I won't pretend anymore." Dad slammed his hand down, his tone harsh. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. This is family, not a place to demand fairness like in the marketplace." I looked at him one last time, tears welling up. You're the ones who turned this into a marketplace. I'm stepping out. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, ignoring my mother's frantic calls and my father's voice behind me. Amelia, you'll regret this. Outside, a light spring rain was falling. I lifted my face to the cold drops, but inside me rose a strange feeling, pain mixed with a sense of release. I knew this decision would change everything forever. But I also knew that if I didn't, I would always remain a failed investment in my parents' eyes. And I swore this time I would not stay silent. After that night, I cut off all contact. I turned off my phone, blocked my parents' numbers, leaving only Ethan, though I didn't reply to any of his texts either. A week passed, my small apartment filled with silence. I taught like a machine by day, then came home only to stare blankly at the ceiling. On the 10th day, after finishing an evening tutoring session, I found someone waiting outside my apartment. Ethan. He wore a thin jacket, his face gaunt from lack of sleep. When he saw me, he only sighed and asked softly, "Amelia, can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. Natalie signaled that she'd head to the neighbors to give us space. In the tiny living room, we sat facing each other, just a few feet apart but feeling like an entire lifetime away. Ethan spoke first, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry. Honestly, I didn't know Mom and Dad took your fund and gave it to me. I always thought both of us were supported equally. If I had known the truth, I would never have accepted it." I stared down at my hands, nails broken from a week of biting them. "You didn't know, but you took it. And because of it, you had your startup, your condo, your luxury car. Me. I had to grind through extra tutoring, shelving every personal need just to survive." He lowered his head, his voice catching. "I was wrong. I was blind to their favoritism. I should have seen it long ago, should have spoken up when I saw you being ignored. I was selfish, too busy chasing my own success." Silence wrapped the room. Outside, the rain tapped against the window, underlining the space between us. After a long pause, Ethan lifted his head, determination in his eyes. "Amelia, I don't want to lose you because of their mistakes, or mine. I'll cover all the costs so you can attend the wedding without any burden. This isn't charity. Think of it as me making things right, returning what you deserved all along." I looked up at him, a bitter smile on my lips. "Do you know how many times I've refused your help? I don't want to become a dependent character in the glamorous story you and Sophia are building." He shook his head firmly. "No, this time is different. This is my responsibility. The wedding is mine. It shouldn't become a weight that wrecks your life. Let me do the right thing for once." I stayed silent for a long while. In my heart, there was still a part that wanted to believe in sibling love. But I also needed to protect my dignity. Finally, I laid out the conditions. If I agree, there will be 3 rules. 1. I'll accept your support, but I'll treat it as restitution, not a favor. 2. At the wedding, I don't want much contact with Mom and Dad. You must make sure I have the distance I need. 3. I will bring Ryan. He's the only support I trust right now. Without hesitation, Ethan nodded. Agreed. All 3 conditions. Ryan's already on the guest list, and I'll arrange everything so you won't face any pressure from Mom and Dad. I lifted my gaze and saw a rare sincerity in his eyes, something I hadn't noticed since he stepped into the world of wealth. Maybe he was tired too, of the burden of being the golden child our parents had forced on him. "Ethan, are you sure you're doing this for me, and not just to ease your conscience?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked straight into my eyes. "I'm doing this for both of us. Because I don't want to look back one day and realize I lost my only sister just because I stayed silent. My success means nothing if it comes at the cost of our family falling apart." At last my tears fell. Not from weakness, but because after all these years, I finally felt my brother was truly on my side. I nodded gently, whispering, "Okay, I'll go. But I'm going not to polish the family's image, only to hold on to something between you and me." Ethan let out a quiet sigh, his shoulders dropping as if he had set down a heavy stone. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. "Inside are plane tickets, the hotel booking, everything you'll need. Don't open it now. Keep it until you're ready. And remember, this isn't pity." I held the envelope, emotions swirling, relief mixed with fear of what lay ahead. Because I knew agreeing meant facing my parents again, and facing the truth that the fracture in our family might never heal. But at least I wasn't alone anymore. The plane landed in Athens before we connected to Santorini. As I stepped off, the salty sea wind hit my face, stirring both awe and ache. I had never traveled this far. Without Ethan, I never would have dared to dream of such a trip. Ryan squeezed my hand tightly and whispered, "Are you okay? We're not here to endure, we're here to prove you deserve to be present." I nodded, though my heart raced wildly. The resort looked like the postcards: whitewashed walls against a sky of brilliant blue, an infinity pool spilling into the glittering Aegean Sea. From the moment we arrived, Ethan met me privately, handing me the itinerary with careful notes ensuring boundaries were respected. Ryan and I had our own room, our table was set far from our parents, and nearly every event had an option to opt out if I wanted. It let me breathe easier, but the ache inside hadn't gone. Each time I caught my mother's eyes from a distance, it felt like needles. She avoided direct contact, wearing an unreadable mask. On the second morning, while Ryan was at the pool, Ethan knocked on my door. He wore a plain white shirt, far simpler than his usual polished look. In his hand was a thick envelope. "I need to tell you something privately." We walked along the stone path circling the cliffs, waves crashing below. Ethan was quiet for several minutes, as though summoning all his courage. Then he stopped and handed me the envelope. "These are papers for a new bank account. It's in your name with a balance of $70,000. The exact amount Mom and Dad should have set aside for you but gave to me instead." I froze, barely able to believe my ears. Why are you doing this?" He met my eyes, steady and firm. "This isn't a gift and it's not charity. This is what you were always meant to have. I'm just correcting the balance. All this time I benefited from that favoritism. Now it's time to set things right." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The documents had my name printed clearly, the numbers so stark they blurred through my tears. Memories rushed back. The years of instant noodles for dinner, postponing dentist visits, shelving the dream of buying a new car. If I'd had this money earlier, how different my life could have been. I choked out, "Ethan, I can't accept this much. I'm afraid I'll always feel indebted to you." He placed his hand firmly on my shoulder, eyes unwavering. "No, Amelia. This isn't debt. This is restitution. You owe me nothing. If anything, I owe you, for staying silent too long, letting you shoulder the injustice alone." Tears streamed down my face. For the first time in years, I hugged him, not as the lesser sibling, but as someone finally seen and respected. "If I use this to pay off my student loans, what then?" I asked softly. "Then you'll have a fresh start," Ethan replied. "Or you can save for a house, build a future with Ryan, whatever you choose. Just remember, it's always been yours." We stood on the stone path, the waves pounding against the cliffs like a soundtrack to our moment. And for the first time I felt a massive weight lift from my shoulders. The wedding that followed was beautiful. On the cliffs overlooking the Santorini sunset, Sophia was stunning in her gown, Ethan radiant by her side. I stood nearby, not as the reluctant bridesmaid, but as a sister slowly finding the bond that had once been broken. My parents were there too, but just as arranged, they kept their distance. We exchanged only a few cold nods. I didn't expect them to change overnight, but at least they were forced to see me present, not crumbling as they had assumed. When the ceremony ended, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for coming. Today wouldn't have been complete without you." I smiled through my tears. Maybe family wounds can't heal instantly, but I had regained something essential: true sibling love. And with that restitution money, I knew I finally had the chance to rewrite my life. Still, I sensed the confrontation with my parents was far from over. Back in Seattle after Santorini, I sat quietly in my apartment, the bank documents Ethan had given me spread on the table. $70,000 printed in bold under my name looked like a dream. For nights I wrestled: use it to clear my debt immediately or save it for the future. In the end, I decided to pay off the student loans that had weighed me down for nearly a decade. The day I received confirmation that the loans were fully paid, I broke down crying in the parking lot. After years of scraping by, stretching every dollar, for the first time in my life I felt free. No more monthly reminders, no more debt chains around my neck. I felt so light that the next day, standing in front of my class, my voice carried with new warmth and confidence. Ryan smiled at me. "You're different now." Like someone who just had a boulder lifted off their shoulders. I squeezed his hand, whispering, I want to live a new life. No longer in anyone's shadow. But that joy carried an emptiness too. My parents. During Santorini, we'd exchanged only distant glances. I thought after returning things would fall back into silence. But a few days later, I was surprised to receive a message from Mom. Amelia, I missed you at Sunday dinner. We need to talk. Whenever you're ready. I read it over and over, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. No sorry in sight, but at least a first sign of them opening their mouths. A few days later, Dad left a voicemail. Amelia, maybe I've been too rigid. If you want, let's meet for lunch next week. I think there are things we need to discuss. I sat in a daze afterward. Not a full apology, but an indirect admission they had been wrong. A tiny crack in the wall of silence. Ethan called me soon after, his voice gentle. I think they're trying, clumsy as it is. You don't have to forgive quickly, but at least give them the chance. I didn't answer right away. Inside me was a storm. Part longing for reconciliation, part fear of being hurt again. I remembered Mom's eyes at the wedding, not dismissive, but tinged with something that looked almost like regret. I wondered if it was real or just an illusion born of my hope. I took a few days to reflect. In that time, I allowed myself small joys I had always denied because of debt. Buying a new pair of shoes not from the clearance rack, taking Ryan to dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, even booking a dentist appointment I'd put off for 3 years. I realized that without debt weighing me down, I could finally breathe fully for the first time. One evening, Ryan asked, if they truly want to make things right, will you forgive them? I froze. Forgive? Such a heavy word. Slowly, I answered, I'm not sure. Some wounds don't disappear. But I can learn to set boundaries. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. He nodded, his eyes full of understanding. In the end, I agreed to meet my parents for lunch. But I knew this wasn't a patch-up dinner. It would be the test, whether they truly wanted to change. Inside, I was ready. I would not allow myself to be diminished ever again. And I sensed that conversation would open a brand new chapter. Either a fragile reconciliation or the final door closing. After many restless days, I decided to seek a therapist. Ryan was the one who encouraged me. Amelia, you can't carry this forever. You need a safe space to peel back the layers of pain. Someone neutral to help you see clearly. So one Thursday afternoon, I stepped into the office of Diana, a well-known therapist in the area. Her room was bright and warm, nothing like the cold place I had imagined. On the desk sat a vase of lavender, its gentle fragrance calming my heart just a little. Diana smiled, her voice calm. Amelia, where would you like to begin today? I hesitated, then broke down in tears with my very first words. I just discovered that my parents took the college money meant for me and gave it all to my brother. And they even said it was good for my character. I told her everything, leaving nothing out. The years of being dismissed, the confrontation at the restaurant, the conflicted trip to Santorini. When I finally stopped, my throat dry, Diana nodded, jotting a few notes. What you've described, she said slowly, is a textbook example of something called golden child syndrome. One child is placed on a pedestal, invested in completely, while the other is only given conditional love. You've been the one living with those conditions. I fell silent. The words conditional love pierced straight into my chest. So, I whispered, my parents' love for me was never unconditional? They may still love you, Diana explained, but that love has been distorted by their values. They measure worth only through achievement and money. So you grew up in an environment of constant comparison. Over time, you learned to deny yourself, believing you were less valuable simply because you didn't meet their standard. I bowed my head as memories flooded back. My mom belittling my drawings, my dad downplaying my writing awards, the house filled with Ethan's certificates while not a single keepsake of mine hung on the wall. Then, how do I break out of that mold? I'm exhausted from trying to prove my worth and never being seen. Diana straightened, her eyes steady. The first step is recognizing your worth does not depend on your parents' judgment. You are not a stock to be invested in. You are a person independent with your own passions and contributions. Teaching doesn't make you lesser. On the contrary, it shows you chose a path that matters to society. What you need is to set boundaries. Boundaries. I repeated. Yes. You have the right to refuse situations that hurt you. The right not to attend gatherings where you're disrespected. The right to say, If you continue to dismiss me, I will walk away. Boundaries don't mean cutting ties. They mean protecting yourself. Hearing that, I felt a faint light flicker inside. For so long, I believed that if I didn't please my parents, I was unfilial. But for the first time, someone told me that protecting myself was also a valid form of love. In the sessions that followed, Diana helped me unravel the knots. She pointed out how I unconsciously sought my parents' approval, how I placed myself below others in every relationship. Each realization hurt and soothed me at once, because at last I had a name for my pain. One day, Diana asked, "If your parents never change, can you go on living with your own sense of worth?" I stayed silent for a long while. Then I nodded, tears streaming, "Yes. Because for the first time I feel enough, even if they never see it." In that moment, I knew the road to healing was long, but I had found the key. I no longer wanted to be the child forever chasing approval. I wanted to be the woman who defines her own worth. Still, deep down, I knew the hardest part hadn't come yet. Sooner or later, I would have to face my parents in a real conversation. But this time, I would walk in different. Not as the daughter begging for love, but as Amelia, the woman who had learned to set boundaries. That afternoon, I chose a cafe downtown. A small restaurant with pale wooden tables and sunlight streaming through tall windows. I wanted neutral ground, not the old house soaked in favoritism, nor an upscale place that made me feel out of place. When my parents walked in, I saw the hesitation in their steps. Dad adjusted his tie, his eyes wavering, while Mom gripped her purse tightly, her face drawn. Ethan and Sophia came too, acting as buffers to ease the tension. We sat, the silence thick enough to hear spoons stirring coffee. Finally, Dad spoke first, his voice low and hoarse. "Amelia, I know our financial decisions in the past weren't fair. I kept telling myself it was for the greater good, but the truth is it hurt you. I admit that." I looked at him, a strange feeling rising in my chest. It wasn't a full apology, but at least for the first time he publicly acknowledged it. Mom stayed quiet for a long time, then sighed. "It's not easy for me to accept this. I still believe what we did for Ethan was to give the family stability. But I don't want you to think you were loved any less. If you ever felt that way, then I regret it deeply." Her words were awkward, but I heard a hint of honesty in them. I took a breath, then spoke clearly. "I don't need pretty words. I need change in how you treat me. If we're going to stay in contact, we need new rules." My parents exchanged a look, then turned back to me. I continued. "When we sit at the same table, you can't make every conversation about Ethan. His success is admirable, but my work matters too. I want to be heard, to be respected." Ethan nodded, adding weight to my words. "She's right. We're family, but meals can't be performance reports. Sophia and I also want the atmosphere to feel balanced." Sophia smiled gently, reaching for my mother's hand. "I believe everyone has a story worth sharing. If dinner is only about investments and companies, it loses the warmth it should have." My mom didn't answer, but I saw her shoulders ease slightly. In the following gatherings, we tried out the new table rules. Ethan and Sophia carefully shifted the focus. After my parents spoke about a trip, Sophia asked me about my students. After Ethan mentioned a tech project, he turned to me on purpose. "Amelia, did anything special happen in your class this week?" At first, my parents seemed awkward, their eyes doubtful that my teaching stories were worth listening to. But gradually they stopped interrupting. I told them about a boy who used to hate math but solved a hard problem with confidence, about an immigrant student learning English while caring for younger siblings. Those details quieted the table, and for the first time I saw my mom smile, not polite but genuinely interested. Then one day my mom called me, her voice trembling. "Amelia, I'd like to visit your class. I realize I've never actually seen you teach." I froze, my heart racing. For years I had longed to hear words like that and thought I never would. That morning she sat at the back of the room. I taught American history to the kids, using maps, drawings, and roleplay to bring it to life. Mom sat silently, watching each gesture, each spark in my students' eyes. When the bell rang, children rushed out, many running to hug me, shouting, "Miss Amelia, today was so much fun." Mom stood, walking toward me. Her face had lost its usual sternness, replaced with surprise and admiration. She spoke softly, each word clear. You're truly wonderful in the classroom. I've never seen you shine like that. You're far more capable than I realized." my vision blurred. It wasn't full recognition for all the years of being overlooked, but it was the seed of genuine respect. That night, lying in bed, I thought, maybe family healing is never easy. It demands patience, boundaries, and courage to voice your needs. But at least I had seen a light. And for the first time, I believed I could rebuild a relationship on a new foundation, one of truth and respect. A year had passed since the night I walked out of the restaurant saying, "I'm stepping out." Looking back, the journey felt like weathering a storm. Much had been broken, but in that breaking I found myself again. Now, every morning I still go to the elementary school on the outskirts of Seattle, where children's eyes remind me my work has value. I no longer let my parents' comparisons cast shadows over my classroom. When a shy student dares to raise their hand, when another reads a passage smoothly for the first time, I know I'm creating something meaningful, even if it doesn't show up in shiny numbers. I've learned to affirm my worth, not from the balance of a bank account, but from the impact I bring to others. That realization freed me from the long shadow of favoritism. My relationship with Ethan is now more real than ever. He's no longer the perfect brother I once loved and envied, but a person, with contradictions, mistakes, and the courage to admit them. We talk more, not just about work or money, but about childhood memories, about what was lost and what can still be healed. One day he admitted, "I used to think carrying the family's expectations was an honor. Now I see it was also a chain." Both of us were victims, just in different ways. I hugged him, and for the first time the bond of siblingship felt whole, no longer distorted by our parents' measures. With my parents, things were still fragile, but at least there was progress. They never gave a full apology, but small actions spoke instead. Sometimes Mom called just to ask, "How was your class today?" A question I had never heard in all those years. Occasionally Dad sent me education articles with a note, "I thought you'd be interested." Those gestures couldn't erase the wounds, but they showed they were beginning to see me differently. We also practiced the dinner table rule whenever we met. Ethan and Sophia gently steered conversations, making sure it wasn't just about contracts or luxury condos. Once, when I shared about a student who drew a picture for me, Mom stayed silent for a long time, then said, "You have a gift for inspiring people." I never thought of that before. Just one sentence, yet it made me feel recognized in a way I never had. Looking back, I realized, when the truth is exposed, no matter how painful, it clears the path for a new kind of relationship. One not built on pretense but on authenticity. If I had stayed silent, I would have remained forever trapped as the lesser child. I also understood that healthy boundaries are the foundation to keep family without losing myself. I can love my parents but not let them define my worth. I can forgive but never forget to demand respect. The biggest lesson I learned: fairness in a family matters more than any profitable investment. My parents once treated Ethan and me like financial projects, choosing whoever had the higher ROI. But family isn't a business. Love should never be calculated as profit. And when we break that cycle, we finally live as a true family. That day, while sitting in art class with my students, a little girl handed me her messy drawing. On it, she had written in shaky letters, "Miss Amelia is someone who believes in me." I stared at the words, my heart tight. That was the answer to all my doubts. I didn't need wealth nor comparisons. I only needed to know that my presence gave someone faith. I looked up at the innocent faces laughing around me and whispered to myself, "This is my real achievement." My story doesn't end with a perfect family, but with a truth. Fairness, respect, and unconditional love. Those are the foundations of every lasting relationship. And I, Amelia, finally learned to walk my own path, no longer needing anyone's judgment to define my worth. Amelia's story reveals a painful but common truth in many families. When parents place achievement and money above unconditional love, children carry scars for life. But her journey also proves that only by exposing the truth and setting boundaries can we reclaim our true value. In real life, fairness in a family isn't about dividing material things equally. It's about giving each person the respect and recognition they deserve, so that family becomes a refuge, not a burden. What do you think about Amelia's story and how she set boundaries with her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more heartfelt real-life stories about family and love.